very warm welcome to this episode of the Skills Bridge Masterclass series, which focuses on future ready skills policy, bridging gaps in low and middle income countries for growth, social justice, and employment. And why we are focusing on this particular subject? The, there are very good reasons for that one. For example, worldwide, in most of the countries, there is high youth unemployment, and also high proportion of youth who are not in education, employment and training. At the same time, a majority of employers worldwide complain of not finding skilled workforce, which meets their requirements. So on one hand, we have surplus skill supply as well as demand, but those are not matching, including those shortages and gaps. And these are hampering employability, productivity, and growth of both enterprises and countries, and also creating deficit in decent work and social justice. While we all know mega drivers such as digital transformation, concern for climate change, migration, and demographic changes are severely impacting the world of work and the skills demand. But these, but then again, skill systems since a long time are facing uh, severe challenges which are causing skills mismatches. These are not new things. For example, industry leaders complained about skills mismatches since decades. They are complaining now, and they are already warning that it will increase in the future. So this today's class is special because it is going to discuss both fundamental issues. What are the causes? Why, despite significant investments being made by countries and reforms being carried out by countries, why the skills policies continue to not perform well, why the skills mismatches continue. And today we are joined by eminent leaders from private sector, from government, from global multilateral organizations who have successfully developed innovative solutions both nationally and globally to tackle skills mismatches. So it is a rare opportunity to learn from them and to gain practical insights and proven strategies from their experiences. And I am Ashwani Agrawal, Head of Skills Policy and Governance at the IRO headquarters in Geneva, and it is my honor to moderate today's masterclass. And I'm also delighted to share that participants from more than 125 countries have registered for today's session. Before we begin, to ensure a smooth and engaging event, I would like to highlight some technical points. Please note that today's session is being recorded. The recording will be made available on the event website after the session. You are encouraged to submit your questions at any time during the webinar. And as you have already seen and discussed, we have already discussed, please use question and answer button located at the bottom of your screen. You can ask or you can type your question at any point of time during this webinar. And our panelists, as we have been discussing with them also, they will answer your questions there itself, but we will also find time at the end of the webinar to answer some of your questions directly live. So as is standard in the webinar format, participants' microphones and cameras are disabled. However, I invite to actively use chat function to share examples of innovative practices, reports, or any experiences from your countries or organization. So this is an opportunity for you to publicize your achievements and make networks with other participants from other countries. Thank you. So now let us begin. So now I'm delighted to welcome panelists for today's roundtable. First, we have Oliver Dell, Deputy Head of Division in the Vocational Education Training, Government of Germany. We also have Nicholas Uma, who is Senior Youth Advisor at the Africa Union Commission. We have Professor Simon McGrath, who is the Professor of Education at the University of Glasgow, UK. We have Ashwin K. Arunachalam, Senior Consultant in Digital Infrastructure, Turner and Townsend, United Kingdom. We have Glenda Quintini, Head of Skills and Future Readiness Division, OECD. Manuela Prina, Principal Education Specialist at Asian Development Bank. And Pawan Baghera, former President of HR, IT, and Education at Tata Technologies, India. Thank you very much. And our roundtable brings together these you can see is a very dynamic mix of leaders, innovators, and change makers. So we will definitely learn significantly from them, but not only from them. All of you who are present here are experts in their field. Please continue to share your experiences so that it enlightens our discussion further. So with this one, now we start, and I invite all participants to take part in the first audience poll to set the stage. This first audience poll is to set the stage, and I will request Pauline to please display the first audience poll. Yes. So this first audience poll, as you can see, will set the stage for this webinar. So what the question is, what are the biggest challenges your country faces in meeting current and future skills demand? There are 11 options. You are free to choose up to 5 options, which you think the 5 biggest challenges your country is facing. We will wait for another 30 seconds. Please choose only up to 5 options. I can see, and actually some participants are asking. In many countries, all the 11 options may be valid, but the purpose is to analyze which are the top most important. But if you choose only 5, that will the graph, it will indicate in a better manner what are the most important one. Otherwise, if everyone chooses all the 11 ones, then we will not get prioritization of that one. Pauline, can you now please display the results, please? Okay, we can see from the results, of course, quite uniformity is there, but still what we can see, uh, the number one seems to be the 60% is the low industry engagement in skills development. Then there is another one which are next two are quite close, next three are quite close to each other. At 50% is inadequate financing and sustainability, um, and also poor data and labor market intelligence, as well as fragmented governance and coordination across ministries and providers. And then also, yeah, there's another one which is numbers are changing also, but it's insufficient work-based learning and apprenticeship opportunities. So these are standing out as the top most uh, challenges which the countries are facing. In fact, all of the challenge, there is none of them which has not some percent of some voting. All of them has some percentages. But let's turn to our panelists who are also represent coming from different regions. For example, we have Nicholas, who is coming from Africa Union Commission. So, my question to Nicholas to you is that what are the two biggest challenges for Africa? Just to compare, because these poll results show the global, like a global average, because our participants from all regions of the world. But let us hear from you, Nicholas. First to you, what are the two biggest challenges for Africa?
Thank you very much, Dr. Ashwani and colleagues in the panel and also participants. Of course, the poll clearly illustrates some of the key issues, and when I limit myself to two, the first one would be from the continental perspective, the fragmented governance and weak alignment between TVET and development policy. Across the continent, skills development is always disconnected uh, with labor and employment, industry, or innovation ministries. And this sometimes results in duplication, inefficiency, and missed opportunities. And this comes out clearly also from what has been chosen from the poll. The second challenge, and this it also comes out clearly, is what I may say inadequate or poor quality and relevance of training, what is sometimes called the employability gap. Choice number two surfaces this. Low industry engagement in skills development means that the quality is not aligned with market relevance. So these are two key issues, and particularly it stems from the low enrollment, outdated curricula sometimes, and the issue of trainers with limited work-based learning opportunities for the trainers sometimes perpetuate the mismatch between education and labor market demands. So those are the
Uh,
two that I will point out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. Now I request Manuela, who is from the Asian Development Bank, uh, to mention two biggest challenges for Asia.
Thank you, Ashwani, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone, also from Manila, Philippines. Of course, it's really challenging to condense the challenge for Asia, as it is, I think, for any other region of the world. So let me offer two insights. The first is the fast-changing needs and also the diverse needs of the economies, the countries, and the community. So when we talk about skills and when we talk about skills matching, we are talking about a huge variety of needs, of situations, and also of demands that are there. And of course, in Asia, we have extremely innovative countries and sectors at the edge of innovation for the world, I would say. And on the other side, we have still to address huge demands in terms of poverty and inclusion. So we need responses for all kinds of needs, and this is definitely a challenge for the region. A second insight that I want to share is regarding foundational skills. So in the region, despite tremendous advancement and achievements, both in terms of participation in education and enrollment, consider also the higher education, the TVET, we still have issues in when we look at how children and young people can address the basics, no literacy in terms of numeracy, in terms of reading and writing. And of course, when this comes into the labor force, there are new challenges that need to be addressed and that are, of course, voiced out by employers in the challenge of matching the demands with the availability of skills.
Thank you very much, Manuela. Let me invite Glenda. As we see, Glenda represents the OECD countries, which are economically developed countries. So let's see what are the developed countries also facing some challenges or no?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say they face all of them, but I'll focus on two. And I see one is quite popular and the other is not so popular in the poll. I'll start with the less popular, which is the limited access and also inequality of access to upskilling and reskilling opportunities. So in OECD countries, if you want on average, about 40% of adults participate in some form of training every year, but access is highly unequal. So you have countries where that's only 13%. And also you have that, in fact, if you look at the low skilled, the only 19% train. If you look at older workers, that's also very low, 26%. That's just the average. So in countries where you start from 13%, of course, these shares are even lower. So you see that those who need it the most, the low skilled, older workers, also workers in more precarious employment, the unemployed, those working for small and medium enterprises receive access training much less. And this is related to many of the elements there, like the barriers to access. So very often people say they do not have the time because of the responsibility of work and life. And this goes with the limited flexibility, which is here, again, not a very popular option, but still 29% thought that was one of the top 5 barriers. And it's also related to financial support. So for many adults, training is still quite too costly to be able to afford it, even in OECD countries. Again, this is mentioned when with the adequate financing, for example. So I think, again, access is important. And although we've had all this discourse of training, upskilling, reskilling, is still limited and it hasn't increased over time. And the second point goes with what has been said, which is the responsiveness of training or the alignment of training with labor market needs and how responsive it actually is. So, for example, you see here many people mention outdated curricula. And it also goes with the low industry engagement. I mean, a typical way that we keep a training curricula up to speed and also initial education curricula is to consult, to know what the labor market needs are. So, of course, involvement of employers is important. The data, again, poor data comes out quite highly. Having data about changing skill needs is also important. And the training of trainers as well, which is not so high, but is crucial to maintaining training aligned with labor market needs.
Thank you very much. I think very interesting point is that uh, there is no country which are not facing challenge in their skills policy and system. And quite common is that more higher level, which is like still relevance of training to the labor market demand, which is coming quite clearly, whether it's developed countries or Asian countries or African countries. Okay, some of the parties might be asking why we are not asking specifically from the Latin American countries. But as you know, the world time zones are so different. We couldn't cover the far east to the far west. So because of the timing, we have less participants from the Latin America. So that is the only reason. But still, there are in the participants, there are many Latin American participants are there. So that is clearly there, but definitely there are some unique challenges in the regions. For example, for the OECD countries, developed countries, it's clearly the aging population. Aging population is there, so they have a strong need for reskilling and upskilling of that and adult learning. While, for example, Asia is saying also the foundational skills. I think the foundational skills will be also important for the Africa also. But since we only asked the top two biggest challenges, The fragmented governance is also coming very strongly in Africa. So with this one, I think background, which has set stage for this our further discussions, that how to what now the next stage we will discuss that what countries are doing and to what success rate is there. For example, it's not that most of the countries are in undertaking reforms and investing money from time to time in building infrastructure and capacity of their staff members to address these challenges, but the outcomes and experiences vary widely across countries. So let's have the audience poll too. So Pauline, can you display the audience poll too? This is to ask the participants that in their context, to what extents have policy reforms helped reduce skills mismatches and shortages? So the poll is in on your screen now. So just here you have to choose only one option, uh, which is the one option which best describes your situation. We will wait for another 15 seconds since we are only to choose on one option only. Pauline, please can you display the results? Now you see very clearly the choice C is the most people have chosen, 48%, and it says some progress has been made. Reforms have addressed certain mismatches, but gaps persist, which is 40. And then another 30% says uh, some reforms introduced limited progress, but impact is minimal. Very, is and then another 14% says not at all. Skills mismatches remains largely unaddressed. If we combine these three together, it's a very poses severe challenges in terms of how the policy reforms in the countries are working. So more or less, it is more than 90% of the participants says in their countries reforms are not working well. So that's it. Now okay, you can close. Now let's go to to our next round of discussion. I will invite with this background our two panelists, Professor Simon and Nicholas. Professor Simon from University of Glasgow and Nicholas from the Africa Union Commission. Now, both of you have seen the results, which is not encouraging, or rather saying very discouraging, that despite policy reforms and investments, situation is not improving. Skills mismatches and gaps continues there. But at the same time, we go to any forum, meetings, or sometimes informal discussion. I've always heard people will say, policymaker will say, we are very good in policy making. We draft very good policies, but the implementation is not good. So is it that simple? Is it only that policies are so good and implementation is poor, or is it also policy making is challenging? So what in based on your research, you have done extensive research, what are the underlying causes of skills policy not meeting its objectives? And also the second part will be what conditions are necessary to underpin implementation. First, let me ask Professor Simon, please.
Okay, thank you, Rani. Well, I think if policies logically are not good if they're not implemented. So I think that's one of the problems we have to have. But we often talk about we've got very great policies, but we're not implementing them. Well, policy's easier than implementation. Generally, if there's not a big political controversy about an issue, it can remain largely a technical process, and we can plan for an ideal world as technical experts. Whereas implementation, there are going to be more people involved. There's going to be more resources needed. There's going to be more other things that people, jostling for people's attention. But I think often the problem is that those making policy have to be making policy, but actually the real levers for change often don't sit with them. And I think the poll, for me, is partly saying that. So a very quick story for you. Andy Burnham, who's now the mayor of Manchester, was health secretary in UK. And when he came into role, he asked his senior civil servant, what are the major problems and what are the major levers that I can use? And so the civil servant described the problems to him, and then said, "Well, here are the levers, but you don't control any of those levers. It's Treasury control this, and the housing department control that, etc." So often, as policymakers, we have to pull levers, but someone's not connected them properly. So I think we need to think about skills reforms are often necessary rather than sufficient for success. And of course, sometimes we're making policies because we have to. The countries that were joining Europe had to sign to the key communautaire to join Europe, and something like qualifications framework was one of 100 things they needed to sign up on. So it was more important to sign everything up than to actually do policy process sometimes. And of course, in other parts of the world, aid may be a major factor in having to have a policy. So I think we need to see that policies are sometimes symbolic, but thinking more about where we go. For me, I think we have to think about the theory of change of a policy. So what are the things that are likely to undermine what we're trying to do? What are the things that are likely to support it? How do we activate the things we want to activate there? How do we deactivate the things that are the problems we're likely to face? And I think it's really important to think about the level of trust and cooperation that's already in the system. I also think, we have to think carefully about capacity before we're doing things. So, what's the capacity to implement in terms of the people we have? Again, going back to the survey, the institutions we have, again, the survey is pulling that, and the data. And I'm always reminded of the work of the early development economist Hirschman. And Hirschman argued that many of the policies that were proposed to developing countries were problematic because if they could deliver those policies, if they had the capacity to deliver them, they wouldn't be in the position they were. And so the policies were best cases for a different world rather than for the realities of the country. So again, policy has to have some chance of being implemented to deserve to be a good policy.
Thank you, Simon, for making a fundamental point. I like your opening sentence when say policy is not good if not implemented well. I link this one because I was recently in a conference in Africa, and one of the policy makers from my country mentioned that they always develop very good policy, and they mentioned many policies they have developed recently, but then very scarcely blamed on the implementers. That policy, the implementers are not implementing well. I think let's first hear from now. We have Nicholas from the Africa Union Commission. So, Nicholas, what is your experience with Africa?
Thank you very much, Ashwani, and also thanks, Professor Simon, for providing that background. African Union is among the institutions that have faced this accusation of having many policies that are sometimes well written but not well operationalized. I think I can talk of what Professor Simon says, but in different ways. One, I will categorize it as a structural cause, what will be policy practice disconnect. And among the reasons, and more specifically for Africa, this is because implementation structures sometimes are weak, underfunded, or not well coordinated, as I mentioned earlier, and also separately alluded to by Professor Simon. Skills reforms need to be sustained and driven by national systems that work. The African Union proposes some aspects of solution on this. First among them is emphasis on strong governance and sustainable financing. And then embedding implementation within national budgets. I think however much we try, countries must own the levers of change. And as Professor Simon mentions, and then strengthening aspects of skills intelligence is also critical to ensure evidence-based execution and also learning of best practices by peers. So this brings me to the second issue, which is capacity and accountability gaps. Many TVET systems lack the institutional, particularly in Africa, institutional and human capacities to implement these reforms. I mentioned weak systems. These systems will include also weak quality assurance bodies and the shortages, particularly of well-trained, capacity-built teachers aligned to labor market needs. And the third issue is ownership. So policies will definitely be weak and may fail when centrally designed without industry engagement and engagement of relevant partners, the productive sector and young people who are expected to impact on the change. So TVET provision needs to be more of demand-driven and opportunity-driven and not supply-driven. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas. I think both of you have mentioned some common and some different points also, but the focus again goes that which links to some of the challenges which we have taken in the audience poll, fragmentation and lack of also consultation with industry and social partners also. Because sometimes we have seen in the countries, the government takes a strong lead, which is good, but they do more themselves. Not adequate consultation and ownership of the social partners, industry, and other stakeholders is there, or even those who are responsible for implementing, because they know the constraint that can come in the way of implementing those policies. So when those are not consulted, so sometimes it may, on paper, these may look fantastic policies. For example, I give an example of one of the countries, I'll not mention the name. They made that apprenticeship, it's just like a institution-based training, 3 years training programs, but they made 1 year like a compulsory work-based learning and part of this one as a compulsory one. Now they never realized it's a good policy, could be said, people can say it's a very good policy to have like a work-based learning integrated into school-based learning, but making it mandatory, what happened? Because they never found enough places, because from the industry who can take these students on board for them in the diverse range of occupations for which the training was taking place in the geographical regions. So ultimately what happened, because this was mandatory as per the law, the students are, after completing 3 years of training, they were not even eligible to appear in the examinations, assessment, and could not get even a certificate. So point is that this was a completely, these kind of things happen when you do not consult every stakeholder. And most of the countries, I've never found they do any feasibility study of when they are making some big changes. You know, sometimes they see, okay, my neighboring country has done this one, or some of the developed countries has done this one. Oh, this seems to be a very good policy. For example, whether we call apprenticeships, qualification frameworks, RPL, many other things, they're all fantastic tools. But point is that each and every one of them requires some conditions, resources, capacity to implement in a particular context that they never understand. So even once I have seen, there was I'm not against to name the countries. One of the countries took a policy stand on developing center of excellence. After a few years, another neighboring countries copied that exactly policy statement, while in the first country that policy was already failing. But they didn't know, and then ultimately both the countries didn't have success in those ones. So these things have to be taken care. So with this one, I think now let's basically now move on to our next round of questions. Uh, but again, I will remind the participants, please use the Q&A tab. Whatever questions you have, please start typing on that one also. Okay, now so far we were discussing about the challenges. But again, there are some good practices. This master class is not only reflecting the challenges, but also finding some good practices. And I will, first of all, I'll request Glenda from the OECD. This is a very interesting area. We all, every country wants to forecast, estimate what is going to be the skills demand, not only forecast, but exact, politicians say we need to know exactly how many number of per workers in a particular skills area will be in demand and other things. But as Nicholas also mentioned, understanding the skills demand is very important. But the most countries face challenges in the low and middle income countries. So what is your experience with the OECD countries? What methodology is our good one, and how low and middle income can they adopt some of these approaches? Please go ahead.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we've done a lot of work in my division on skills anticipation, including a lot of work also in collaboration with the ILO. And we have looked at skills assessment and anticipation overall, and also for specific sectors like the health sector for in the context of the green transition more recently. And the messages are all very similar. That again, some of the messages we've just heard about implementation. So skills intelligence is more easily translated into action, into policy, when there's a wide range of stakeholders that are brought on board from the very start, so that the format and the scope of these exercises are aligned with the needs of the final users. We know that most of these assessments focus on occupations or industry or level or qualifications. But in fact, there is value in assessing skill needs, particularly in terms of feeding the information into policies for reskilling and upskilling, and when other learning systems are modular to allow identifying specific skill gaps and to shorten training pathways. Another important element is that skills assessment and anticipation can be general for the whole economy, but when they are often more effective when they are focused on a specific policy project. And so that the information is generated to address that particular project. And also they're more effective when there is a mix of quantitative methods. So you mentioned it, having exact numbers, perhaps having a statistical model often done by the Statistical Institute in each country, and mixing with either for validation or as a separate exercise with more qualitative methods like foresight, discussions with employers, and so on. And low and middle income countries face bigger challenges, but there are, as you said, some good examples as well. So data requirements are a big challenge because quantitative methods, for example, are very data demanding. So if you want to set up a model to estimate a future skill needs, then you need very solid data. And we know that the poor data is a big issue. We heard it as one of the top challenges. And also you need people with sufficiently advanced skills. I think Nicholas was mentioning institutional and human capacity, which is very important in this case. But this is the reason why, for example, in low and middle income countries, often these exercises are done quite successfully with qualitative data to inform skills and training needs. And these methods are generally easier to set up in contexts where the statistical expertise is more limited. They also require less funding. Funding is often a barrier, again, everywhere, but in particular in low and middle income countries, and qualitative methods tend to be less financially, I mean, require less money. And for this reason, in low and middle income countries, we see a lot more qualitative methods being applied. There's an issue of reliability as well. This is a general issue. When we worked, we did a skills assessment and anticipation study of the healthcare sector. So how countries are looking at the needs for doctors and nurses and so on, which covered several low and middle income countries. So we had South Africa, Ethiopia, and Ghana in Africa, for example, but also the Philippines and Colombia. And what we found was that particularly the country using quantitative methods, the reliability and availability of labor market data was cited as a major barrier to translating the skills assessment and anticipation into policy, because people did not believe necessarily, they did not have trust in the data that was available. Governance also comes up quite strongly across countries, but also in low and middle income countries, because involving all relevant ministries, but also all relevant stakeholders. So we're going to employers, to training providers, is crucial. And there are some excellent examples actually coming from countries outside the OECD. So, for example, you have the exercise that's done by Senai in Brazil, which is an employers association. But there's also many others, for example, in South Africa as well, where the SETAs, the skills and technology associations are meant to do this assessment, which is then passed on to the ministry to develop lists of critical needs. Barriers to use the information are also steeper for low and middle income countries. We know that there's two challenges. One, producing the data and then using it for policy. And using it for policy for developed countries is generally the biggest challenge. I would say for low and middle income countries, you have both developing the information and then using it. It's a little bit like designing the policy and then implementing it. But there are, again, some excellent examples. So, for example, in South Africa, the SETA, so the Sector Education and Training Authorities, develop a sector skills plan. Then it's sent to the Department of Higher Education and Training, which uses it for students intake. It also uses for the critical skills list that I just mentioned to shape migration policies, for example. And in Colombia, the Ministry of Health, Labor and Education all reported that they are using the information to inform prospective students, so mostly for career guidance. And there is a lot of use also by trade unions, another important stakeholder. So in Argentina, for example, there's the trade union of the health workers, which gathers information for the purpose of collective bargaining, for the purpose of developing training, and also to request scholarships. And in South Africa, also the National Council of Trade Unions uses the information to negotiate on working conditions. And in Ghana, we found that the health services workers unions, in cooperation with other trade union partners in Norway, is identifying a gap of skilled labor in some sectors in the healthcare workforce. So there's a lot of use, but challenges on both sides in the developing of the information, but also then in making use of the information in policy making. I'd say the problem is not so for developed countries, but certainly bigger for developing countries.
Thank you very much, Glenda. I think you very comprehensively discussed the issue of quantitative and qualitative methods, their reliability, and also in the context of low and middle income countries, when the data reliability or the availability is not enough, then what could be the qualitative options that are there? And then you have given some good examples from the countries, even from the Latin and say low and middle income countries, which are doing quite well in anticipating skills demand and forecasting also. Thank you very much for that one. Now, for example, I'll invite attention of panelists to a very vibrant Q&A tab where you can see a lot of questions are already coming up. So I'll invite particularly Nicholas as well as Professor Simon. There are some questions related to the policy development. If you can try to answer some of the questions. Uh, and of course, the first question itself very interesting. The first question is says, what countries around the world are doing to make vocational training an inspiration, aspiration? Sorry, uh, very interesting question. Of course, we have speakers from even from Germany. Later on, of course, he can also answer, which is very Germany, as you know, is a very in that one vocational training is considered very aspirational, very important for the people. Even from where we are moderating, ILO headquarters is there, Switzerland. This is a country where two-thirds of all young people they undergo vocational training, which is very, very unique. This so this and here lot of CEOs of big organization, even the biggest bank from the, for example, the UBS and other some biggest ABB chairperson, they have been in many of them have been in the past. They started their career as an apprentice. And then later on, they became even the CEOs. There are so many professors are there in the universities. So I think there are a lot of to learn from these countries. But I will not go into details of this one. I will request our panelists to try to answer those questions. I'll go to Oliver first now. And I'm also looking at the time constraints, so maybe I have to just go a bit faster. Oliver, you are from the government of Germany, and world over people know German is known for many things, but also for quality apprenticeship, dual apprenticeship model. So, but most of the low and middle income countries, they have relatively low proportion of apprenticeship compared to the school-based system and underdeveloped system. So, what practical lessons from Germany's dual vocational training model could help them strengthen their apprenticeships, particularly in SMEs?
Thanks, Ashwani, and thanks to for having me here. I'm delighted to give some thoughts and share some. And hello to everyone on the show, I would say. Now, I would rather say two things because the discussion has been already quite diverse. We haven't heard about values and beliefs, and I think this is a big strength in the system that I'm representing here. Employers and apprentices share a certain belief that vocational training can work for them. It's a win-win situation. And that belief has been the secret of success in the past. And I think what our policy tries to establish to make that promise a promise for the future. And why do I say this? Because a lot of vocational training can be set by numbers and data and quotas and so on. But when I go into companies and I talk to apprentices and even those people who own the companies, a lot of what they do is because they believe that there is a common responsibility, that there will be a good outcome, because vocational training is an investment into the future. Young people invest their time because they feel it's a good way forward. And they will, at the end, have a certificate or have a skill, which then leads them to the next step in their life. The same size belief is on the employer side. They believe that within 2, 3, 4 years, they will probably stick to the same person or the skill that the person represents, and they will make money and have a successful business. So this connection somehow, we are only brokers as a government. So if you ask me for what is the policy of the German government to make vocational training strong, I think there's a lot of talk, but there's not a real big policy. The policy is keep the system running somehow. So maybe this is a message that I would give to those colleagues who live in and represent lower and middle income countries. there's no silver bullet about vocational training. At least that's what my experience after 20 years in the ministry. And I do not even have the aspiration to turn around people in their beliefs, but we are part of a system. And the systems approach, I think, make that future ready is a challenge. So let me just have 2 or 3 quick remarks on that. I think, yes, we are overregulated, and the German system has grown over many years, and this has led to many people, many cooks standing on the stove trying to stir the wet meal. And that makes us less agile than we wanted to be. I think that is a big issue that we're trying to cut out. There's too many stop signs in the system. Over time, we have underestimated the lack of social skills that are needed in the vocational training. The German system is too much oriented into factual skills, into technical skills. But we need to, we have a big portion of young people who come out of belief systems, I would say, belief systems that do not know how vocational training works. So there's a pre-entry hurdle that makes it more difficult for them. At the same time, we need them. And of course, we have underestimated the international dimension of vocational training. Unlike the academic system, the German and maybe also the Swiss and Austrian system, which are traditional dual systems, we have always thought we could work with our own people, and that is not the truth anymore. The reality numbers, coming back to the magic 400,000 skilled workers as a net influx to Germany per year, will only secure the level of skilled workers that we have today. We're losing 1 million per year on the labor market. That is dramatic. And if vocational training does not open up to this international dimension, I think then we have a problem. So there's no silver bullet. There's no big policy on vocational in our system, I would say, but we're working on these 3, 4 main issues, and it will be probably a marathon rather than a quick run. That's what I can say. Thanks.
Thank you, Oliver. Before I come back and supplement some of the points which you have excellently mentioned about the German system, I will request other panelists. For example, Manuel, if you like to see, there is a question from Tola, how development partners support policy implementation. Maybe ADB does a lot of support to the countries. Maybe you'd like to answer. Nicholas, there are some questions also on the policy one. And particularly there is something on reforms and other things are there. And Glenda, you have generated a lot of interest also. Thank you. There are some questions for you how to address those one, please. So I'll request all of you, please kindly look at that one and try to answer those questions. And also just coming back to Oliver. Oliver, very honest, reflected on the, the current thinking in the German dual apprenticeship systems. But again, sometimes in other countries, they consider apprenticeship as a very simple model of like a learning, mostly learning a practical training in the company and learning some theory in the schools. It is not as simple. Even, for example, whether it is, the topmost countries which are considered for apprenticeship, like Germany, Austria, Switzerland, all of these countries also have tremendously reformed their system. They brought in what is called a culture of school-based training system also in apprenticeship system, because many of the companies, they also have SMEs, or when the unification of Germany took place from the East Germany also. So, many companies require support because they cannot provide training for the whole qualification curricula. They may not have the facility, they may not have facility for the latest technology, which may be reflected in the curricula. So what these countries have done, they are supporting industry associations, chambers to set up interplant training center in a particular sector. So those sectors are like a training center but operated by the companies. So some part of the training takes place there. Complementary part of the training takes place, so that that kind of training which is not exist facility is not existing in a company. So the trainees apprentices learn. So you can see, and some of the big companies, for example, uh, they also have set up a training center but within the factory premises, so they operate them. So they first put the apprentices on that in the training center for a longer period before they go into the on the job training. So you can see there is no pure original form of apprenticeship and no pure school-based learning. Gradually there is a more and more amalgamation of that one, and particularly as the technology is increasing very fast, so and becoming very sophisticated, it's not that easy to put a young person directly on a production process to learn with those sophisticated machines. They have to learn of the production line, but point is that these are not school government controlled centers. These are owned and operated by the industries themselves. So they integrate. That's the beauty of these ones, that the leadership still remains with the industry, and they do some part of the training in the training center and complementing both the ways they will think is appropriate. And then some of these company they also conduct training for their as suppliers also. We'll go to that one in the next section, because we have uh, two representatives from the industries also. So we'll go now. Before we go to them, let us see very important point, that as we are discussing, the skills development driven by strong partnership with the industry is essential for transforming challenges into opportunities and matching skills demand and supply. However, as we are seeing, the involvement of industry in the skills policy and systems is very uneven. So we invite all the participants to take part in the third audience poll, which is related to understand what is the current situation of. Pauline, can you please launch the audience poll 3? Yeah, the question is that to what extent is industry playing a leading role in skills development and lifelong learning in your country? Before we go I think this will set the stage for our next discussion with the two industry representatives. So first, let us see what is the current reality. So you have to choose a participant, dear participant, you have to choose only one option. So Pauline, can you please close the poll now? Okay, again, here we can see the situation is not very satisfactory. 56% say industry engages occasionally, ad hoc partnerships, limited systemic roles. And again, we see uh, they're also saying that industry is passive. And so most important is that it's not satisfactory. So let's go to the now, you can close the poll, please. Thank you. Now let's go to our industry representatives. We have two industry representatives today with us, Pawan and Ashwin, Arunachalam. So let me go to the Pawan first. Pawan, you're coming from India, and in the recent few years, there is a significant involvement of Indian industry in the skills development in India. So could you share some good practices from Indian industry in promoting skills development? Please.
Thanks, Ashwin, for having me here and providing my thoughts. And hello, everyone. So, as far as India is concerned, I think these are known things that 65% of our population is less than 35 years of age, and there's a huge demographic dividend. And so, to convert this dividend into meaningful, employable youth so that the economy can go up, the government had taken two important policy initiatives. One was in 2015, we had a Skill India mission launched by government, which had skill sector councils, which were focused on specific sectors. to promote that what is required by particular industry. And second is 2020 new education policy, which for the first time integrated the vocational training in the mainstream. So I just wanted to call those out because I think these were very, very important interventions, which actually led to so that's one part. The second part is that somehow in India, that's why I was thinking that is finance a problem? Potentially, finance is a secondary problem. The biggest problem is we have a lot of money going in skilling, but that is going in the wrong place in terms of industry has changed and what is being trained is not suitable for industry. We talked about all these points. And so, what is happening now from a good practice perspective is that industry is coming forward, but still there is no formal government mechanism to kind of ensure that academia and industry come together as part of their KPI. And so what we are seeing is that in India, a lot of dynamic academicians and industry leaders, when they get together, there is very, very good thing happening. I can give you some examples like Tata Technology from where I come. We have built a at scale skilling program for Industry 4 and also for EVs, where we are creating 900 centers which are going to impact 400,000 students every year. The second is there are companies which are seeing a particular need for their own requirement. So they are going to academic institutions and then working with them to say, we will set up a lab, we will train our people and take them forward. And such labs are now growing. We have Maruti doing it, we have got TVS doing it, we have got L&T doing it, we have got Info. So a lot of big companies are coming and doing those things. Also, we are seeing that when there are education institutes which are inviting industry representatives on their boards, that also is providing certain amount of reality check in terms of what academics are doing and how suitable the output of academic institutes is for industry. So so a lot of things are going on from those perspective. But I think there is a lot more need to be done to bring academia and industry together. Industry is hungry for talent. At the same time, I think the wall which exists between the academia and industry, that need to become a lot more permeable. Ashwini.
Thank you very much. I think Pawanji for bringing very good perspective, saying that it also involved the government making a conducive policy environment for the industry to participate, which is very important, and also motivation for industry. And it has also led that now industry is also strongly leading the skills development sector. Now I'll go to our one panelist which has not spoken so far. I'll go to him, but before that one, I could see one comment from someone from India who was mentioning about a very good that presentation of Oliver was very good in informing what is the reality and what are the also some challenges faced by the German system. Otherwise, they also think that is a foolproof system. But again, as I mentioned, complimented Oliver, it is still a very strong system, I'll say. When he's acknowledging some higher level challenges. But again, as I say, it has been very progressive over the years, not only now. It is from 30, 40, 50 years. It has significantly changed. And some of the examples which I mentioned is eye-opener for the many countries that when they think apprenticeship only two places of learning. Nowadays, it's multiple learning places. And I only mentioned another interplant training center or training center, but then there's also intermediaries, also very strongly supported in some countries, including in Australia, where there's a third organization which has set up support system for the small, medium enterprises, not only for learning practical training, but also for administrative support. So there has to be any system has to be always keep on monitoring and evaluating what is happening. That's what challenge is there in many of the low and middle-income countries that never do a proper monitoring and evaluation that what is happening, what is working, what is not working. But and then they have to also bring, for example, Germans is very ideal system in terms of social partnership. They at the apex body, they have BIBB, which is called in short form in English. They have 25% are represented from the federal ministry, 25% from the state governments, and 25% from the employers, and 24% from the workers' organization. And they take decisions through voting also. And if you compare training authorities on most of the countries, either the social partners are missing, or in a 20 persons, there will be one employer and one workers represented, and then how their voice will be heard. So you have to think about the underlying systems also. Now with this one, without taking too much time, I'll go to Ashwin, who also comes from United Kingdom. He has a lot of experience in working in Singapore and United Kingdom, various companies. So my question to you is that in the age of rapid technological changes, how the private sector promotes a culture of lifelong learning and learning digital skills among employees.
Thank you, Dr. Ashwani. Firstly, I'd like to thank everyone's answers. It's been quite eye-opening to understand the kind of policies and efforts that's been going into, embedding these lifelong learnings as a part of industry. Something I wanted to sort of answer my question with is something Oliver mentioned about values and beliefs. Something that I've seen in my career, having worked in different organizations, currently now with Turner and Townsend, but previously with Mott MacDonald, in the UK, in Singapore, and some small medium enterprises as well, is the beliefs and values that they bring. And the technological change is quite rapid, as you mentioned. However, to sort of keep up with this change, there are certain values put in place, such as Turner and Townsend has put in always learning and bringing the best in everybody else, whereas Mott MacDonald has also mentioned about progress and excellence. So these are models that are put in place so employees are encouraged to take in any sort of development opportunities that come up. However, some of the access to these development opportunities starts off sometimes in small medium enterprises, and I've seen that there are a lot of policies that have been implemented in organizations such as such as apprenticeships, where you have a certain number of people that you have to hire from a certain group of individuals. And digital platforms and AI tools are also embedded as a part of these uh, sort of development processes. Some of the upskilling that comes from this are very inclusive and they're made to be collaborative. So, as you mentioned, some of these conversations that all of us are having, it needs to become more accessible to individuals who don't have access to development and skills development. Some of the internal things that Turner and Townsend and Mott MacDonald and all these big companies do is embedding this inclusiveness through recognition and empowerment of these employees. So as a consultant myself, I've been in many projects where involved with small medium enterprises, where we have to upskill and train them as a part of projects and commissions, etc. So from our viewpoint, or from my viewpoint, I've seen that this empowerment actually is a bit of a trickling effect. We are supporting individuals in small and medium enterprises and lower middle class income countries through projects and commissions, and the projects that we select and choose are very rigorously thought out, and it embeds the scalable technology from a much lower level. So at least that's been my experience in my career so far. And I think there was one question in the chat as well requesting for sort of my career development. And I think having been a graduate and now a senior consultant, I think the actual trajectory has been quite framed. There's a lot of frameworks put in place for behaviors and values that needs to be embedded as an employee, and this is assessed throughout everyone's career. So the more senior you get, you obviously get to choose your own pathway, and you have opportunities to choose things more proactively. However, at a more graduate and fundamental level, there are certain frameworks that need to be put in place. And I understand now that most of these policies are coming from individuals such as yourself, and they are embedded at the core. But yeah, so that's sort of my answer to that question, to rapid changing technology.
I think you elaborated very good points, and you also partly mentioned about the small enterprises. Now, this is always a challenge for the small enterprises. So, what is your experience that how can SMEs be better supported to adopt digital skills and inclusive practices?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think small medium enterprises are embedded in all kinds of projects. I think MNCs or any big organizations won't be able to do a lot of specialist efforts without small medium enterprises. Subcontracting is a part of every organization. And I think what actively does happen, and I've seen happen, is embedding that inclusion of technology in every project. So mentorship is one opportunity that a lot of MNCs use, where you do have larger organizations act as collaborative partners, and some of the challenges could be funding and resources with SMEs. And I think the way we can surpass this or find a different route is, as a part of projects, you need to embed training and upskilling. So change management becomes a big piece when it comes into these sort of partnerships. And I think, as a part of project inclusions from SMEs, you need to embed these frameworks. Otherwise, you don't have the opportunities that that some of these MNCs do have, and I think that's how that trickling effect would work. Otherwise, there's just a bit more challenge. I think Pavan's got his hand up.
Yeah, Pavanji, please go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add what we are seeing that in one of the state in India, the government industry department has decided to create centers of innovation and incubation, which are providing MSMEs an opportunity to get their people trained, and also those who are out of the colleges and do not have opportunity and infrastructure of colleges can also go and get trained there at a very low fee. So we are seeing that kind of a structure is working. And the other interesting thing is that after one state took on this and found success, we are seeing one by one other state industry departments are coming and creating such centers for MSMEs and others who can't afford very high cost infrastructure at their individual levels. I just wanted to add that.
That's good. Thank you very much. I think now we are a bit nearing the time complete towards the end of the session. But before that one, before I request Manuel to deliver the concluding remarks. Maybe I request one for 1 minute each. For example, uh, Oliver, Glenda, and Simon, for their final recommendation to low and middle income countries to make their skills policy and ecosystem future ready. First, maybe we'll start with the Oliver, please.
I can I can only assure you that from the German side, we are very open to dialogue, not because we are the best or the biggest vet system in Europe. Like Ashwani said, the system is working. But as much as you, we feel the need that we'll have to cooperate much stronger in the future, much stronger than we have done in the past. And of course, that belief that vet is a solution for the future needs a strong echo in your countries, because here is where we are, here's where the markets lie, here's where the partners are, and here is where also the future workforce is growing, that we are gonna hopefully invite participating in our future success too. Thanks.
Thank you. Glenda, please.
Yes, thank you. I'll try and be brief because you have little time, but perhaps I'll put the accent again on better aligning skills policies to labor market needs, and maybe three key elements to that. One, we've said it many times, involve all relevant stakeholders, and in particular involve employers in some ways, either through private and public partnerships, but also involve them in the design of policies, consult them, validate, for example, policy proposals or actions that are aimed to respond to changing skill needs. Also make the updating of training content and occupational, so training profiles and occupational profiles more agile. In many countries, it still takes several years to update this content, which means that then when you go to train for certified training in particular, you find yourself with a curricula or a training profile that's not up to speed with the needs of the labor market. Also inform the individuals or final users, young people, adults, through effective career guidance. So again, I think we can't stress enough the importance of guiding young people, but also adults, help them navigate these changing skill needs and more complex labor markets, and also more complex adult learning systems, because we've just said we need them to be more flexible, more agile. So as a result, they also need more support. And final point, just summarizing what I said before, I think in terms of improving labor market information system, in particular, making sure they're designed to feed into policy. And I think the model that's emerging as the best model is one that mixes quantitative and qualitative methods and then feeds these results somehow into relevant policy measures.
Thank you, Glenda. I think you have also answered some of the questions which are still there, because some people are saying only qualitative data is difficult. And Glenda never said that one. I think she's saying a combination of both quantitative and qualitative data is required. But the challenge is that if the country doesn't have a good system of capturing the data and reliable data, and for example, there is also challenge. For example, if there is a large informal economy, which is very difficult to capture data also, because informal economy itself by definition is something which is not recognized. So then how you can capture the data? So, this field is very difficult. But Glenda, you like to say something?
Yeah, no, I wanted to say that it's perhaps less difficult than people imagine. A lot of the measures that we have on skill shortages or skill gaps are based on labor force surveys. So I know many low and middle income countries don't have regular labor force survey, but that's not a very complex data. That's not the most complex data collection. So that's one point I want to make. For me, there's also no particular reason why the informal economy would be not included, right? Here we are talking about asking questions about what are the emerging skill needs, right? We are asking employers, we could be asking trade unions, we could be asking, training providers. Why would they only answer thinking of the formal economy, right? So there's nothing, for me, changing skill needs is something that's overarching. So there is, in my view, less of a risk that we are not capturing informal workers.
Yeah, perfect. That's what, some of them ILO is also discussing with the, statistical organization also to include some new indicators. So that captures better what is the information of what is happening in the informal economy through apprenticeship or directly also. So there's some more needs to be changed also. But I think many of the questions we are also answering here. But, I can say some of the questions require much more in-depth answering. For example, when you are saying how to make the system very agile and everything, it's a whole skills policy. It's not only one method you can make. But it requires very, very complete. I think we can have one session itself completely on how to make the system agile. But again, many of the answers we have already given. For example, maybe Oliver, if you like to answer one of the question which says, how can we expand internship opportunity for TVET trainees abroad to enhance cross-border training exposure? Can you share best practices? I think the European Commission is already promoting this kind of a thing within Europe, but within Europe. So that is one good practice is there. But now, further ado, I think let's meet and request Manuela for the most difficult part of the task to come and try to conclude our discussion and provide concluding remarks. Manuela, please.
Thank you, and thank you for leaving me the most difficult task of the day, especially as here it's 7 p.m. So
Oh,
it's also time to start the evening part of the day. Thank you to all the panelists for your insights. I think you captured tremendously well the complexity that we have in front of us. So let me conclude with a few insights. The first is that talking about matching is probably something that is like talking about a game you can never win. Okay, so it's part of the assumption. Is really matching possible? Are we talking about really some jigsaws of a puzzle that really perfectly fit together? I think the answer is no. So I think we have to shift also the narrative when we talk about the complexity of skills systems and ecosystems, especially in 2025 and going forward. So some of the elements from the governance, the data, the assumptions and the values are all things that need to be well transparently discussed. So we know that the ingredients to have a functioning system are the same. So we're talking about data, we're talking about good governance, we're talking about collaboration, we're talking about sharing shared objectives, we're talking about having a idea of where we are going in the short and the medium term. We're also talking about creating new jobs and new demands that will come in the future. But what this means today in 2025 is very different from what this meant 10 years ago, 25 years ago, 50 years ago. Also, the perspective we have, are we talking about a city? Are we talking about a region? Are we talking about a sector? Are we talking about a nation? Are we talking about a continent? Are we talking about the world? What is our perspective when we talk about matching? And I think this is very relevant, as we also observe that sometimes we train for skills, for jobs that are somewhere else, or they are, for example, in the virtual world. So let me conclude by saying that more than in a matching perspective, we are in an equilibrium perspective. I always like to use the game theory that is an important part of economics. And I think it's important that we first decide if we are in a cooperative game where we can actually ask ourselves, what are we aiming at achieving and what are our strategies? Or we are in a non-cooperative game where we think that each part of the system will lose something if we declare our strategies. So taking the assumption that we are not anymore in a perspective where the education system is offering its outputs to the world of work, but we are in a much more complex domain with more players playing the game, more demands, more complexity, more needs for skills at different stages of life. I think this is a beautiful game that we can definitely play together. And the biggest challenge, and this is my last message for all of you, is not to give up. So to continue playing and maintain this cooperative attitude, which is what will make the game really relevant and beneficial for all citizens and communities.
Thank you very much, Manuela, for a very difficult task. Uh, I know we are just overshooting the time, but only because there is one question which is still catching my attention, and is important. Inclusiveness of the. It talks about where or which countries can we learn examples of best practices for people with different impairments like hearing, sight, physical impairment is for people with disability and slow learners. So anyone who has an can you take the floor and just mention the name of the countries. Maybe any country has a good practice on the including people with disabilities.
Well, I come from a country, for example, Italy, that I think has a very strong inclusion policy and history, to the extent that when I discuss those issues with many countries, for me is an effort to understand how come it's not
Wonderful.
done.
So
Okay.
definitely Italy is one. I'm sure Simon, is what about Scotland or UK? Does it offers a good practice?
I would say that our colleges predominantly focus on those who are most disadvantaged. We have a notion of an index of multiple deprivation, and very significant numbers of our college learners are from the bottom decile of that. We have overrepresentation of people with neurodivergence, with special educational needs, with refugees and migrants. So yes, the college system has become very central to addressing the needs of various groups who have been marginalized in the system more widely.
Thank you very much. So I think there are many countries where examples exist. Some of the countries' name we have mentioned. Now, so with this one, I'll say the one point definitely I will say uh, for a good skills policy, again, while manual has one, is that all the stakeholders involvement, feasibility studies, uh, as well as having enough resources to implement, must be all those things have to come together. But again, we don't need to talk only of the policy or dialogues only. I think dialogue to action is very, very important. With this one, I can see Glenda has raised the hand. Maybe Glenda, I'd like to say some final words.
No, I just wanted to say that there's amazing opportunities that technology offers these days for people with disabilities. We are about to launch a report on young people neurodivergencies and how to keep them in vocational education and training, facilitate their access to the labor market. We also had another report about how AI can support workers with disabilities. So I think, I mean, in addition to, of course, Johnny Manuela also in the example, I agree with what she said, and also Simon about what's, the UK. But I think, again, more generally, there's a lot of potential there, so we can try and leverage it.
Good. Thank you. I think I am continuously looking at the questions. More or less, we have answered large number of questions, 39 questions online also, but we have also answered most of the questions through interactive discussions or already providing information. I think that should be good enough. But now again, I think I also want to mention, since Oliver from Germany is also here, I think they have initiated a very good program which is called Towards a Global Tibet Agenda, a program. And it's a very innovative program to take care of all these issues which we are discussing, to support various countries in coming up with a new narrative, as well as implementing the narrative across the world, so that this problem of skills mismatch is minimized. And in this effort, they are also very notable point to notice that they have taken many implementing partners. For example, ILO, OECD, European Training Foundation, World Skills International, and UNESCO Univoc together. And of course, the whole German expertise through the ministries and the BIBB is always there. So I think we have to complement these kind of efforts of the countries who are not strengthening their system, but they also want to strengthen the system across the world. So that one, so I'll say thank you very much, Oliver. Please convey our thanks to your ministry for taking up this initiative. We are very, very grateful for that one. And in fact, this
And
whole seminar,
it's an open initiative, so it's not a closed
yeah.
shop, but we're just starting. So thanks for mentioning it, and hoping for your support, and to everyone who listens. Thanks.
And in fact, one of the components which ILO is implementing is part of that one is on the skills policy, global skills policy guide on that one. And this whole basically webinar actually feeds into that one also information. All these things will be feeding, and we'll be coming back to all the participants again. And if you have any questions, Des, you can always write to us. We'll be very glad to provide support even after this webinar is over. So with this one, I will say thank you very much to all the participants for staying with us, for the speakers, for the active participation, and also like to say special thanks to my colleagues, Pauline especially, who has been the completely pillar behind organizing this event successfully, and also Samyukta, who supported some work. So I trust this event was very valuable, informative for all of you. And finally, please remember the recording of this webinar will be made available on the event website. So once we have, it may take for us about 7 to 10 days to edit and everything there. We will send a thank you email along with those who have all attended this webinar, and also inform the location link of that recording to all of you. So please continue to follow our masterclass series. This was 12th episode. We will come up return with more exciting sessions, bringing you the globally best practices and leading voices in this sphere. So we'll meet again. Stay healthy, happy, and peaceful. Thank you to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.